February 1945. The Pacific War neared its climax. On a small volcanic island, only 8 square miles in size, the United States and Japan would clash in one of the most ferocious battles of the Second World War. The battle for Iwo Jima would last just 36 days. But in that short span, more than 26,000 Americans would be killed or wounded. Nearly all of the 21,000 Japanese defenders would die where they stood. This is the story of the full Battle of Iwo Jima, the brutal fight that became a symbol of sacrifice, endurance, and the high price of victory. The Pacific War in 1945. By early 1945, the war in the Pacific had raged for more than 3 years. The United States had moved island by island, capturing key positions and pushing ever closer to Japan itself. From Guadalcanal in 1942 to the Marianas in 1944 and the Philippines by January 1945, the U.S. had steadily advanced. The strategy was simple: seize islands close enough to Japan to use as forward bases for bombing and invasion. The closer the Americans got, the tighter the noose around Japan's homeland became. But there was one obstacle that could not be ignored. Halfway between the Marianas, where American B-29 bombers were stationed, and Japan itself lay Iwo Jima. The island was small, barren, and volcanic. From Iwo Jima, Japanese fighter planes could intercept American bombers heading to Tokyo. Japanese radar on the island gave early warning of incoming raids. And, perhaps most importantly, if captured, the island could serve as a base for damaged American bombers returning from Japan, and later for fighter escorts to protect them. For the Americans, Iwo Jima was a stepping stone. For the Japanese, it was the shield of their homeland. Preparing for the invasion. The Japanese knew the Americans were coming. For months, they worked to transform Iwo Jima into an underground fortress. Under the command of General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, an experienced officer who had studied in the United States, the Japanese adopted a strategy unlike any they had used before. Kuribayashi understood that he could not stop the invasion, but he could make the Americans pay a price so high it might shake their will to continue the war. Instead of defending the beaches directly, Kuribayashi ordered his men to dig deep into the volcanic rock. They constructed 11 miles of tunnels, bunkers, and hidden artillery positions. Nearly 21,000 Japanese troops waited underground. Kuribayashi forbade banzai charges, the desperate, suicidal attacks common earlier in the war. Instead, his men would fight from cover, conserving ammunition and inflicting maximum casualties. When the Americans landed, they would not be met with a frontal defense, but with a storm of hidden fire. The invasion begins. On February 19, 1945, the largest invasion fleet yet assembled in the Pacific approached Iwo Jima. More than 450 ships carried the 5th, 4th, and 3rd Marine Divisions, nearly 70,000 men. For 3 days before the landing, American battleships and aircraft bombarded the island. Shells and bombs pounded the surface, throwing up smoke and ash. Many in the fleet believed little could have survived such punishment, but the Japanese were underground. They waited. At 9 a.m., the first wave of Marines hit the beaches. The sand was not like the beaches of home. It was volcanic ash, fine and soft, swallowing boots and vehicles. Tanks and trucks bogged down, unable to move. The Marines struggled forward, carrying heavy packs and weapons, their legs sinking with each step. At first, there was silence, no gunfire, no resistance. Some Marines believed the bombardment had worked. Then, at 10 a.m., the island erupted. Artillery, mortars, and machine guns unleashed a storm of fire from hidden positions. The beaches became killing grounds. The battle for Iwo Jima had begun in fire and blood. The struggle for Mount Suribachi. The southern end of Iwo Jima was dominated by a looming figure, Mount Suribachi, a 554-foot extinct volcano. From its slopes, Japanese artillery and machine guns rained fire onto the landing beaches. For the Marines, capturing Suribachi was the first and most urgent objective. For 4 days, Marines of the 5th Division fought their way toward the mountain. Every yard was contested. Japanese soldiers emerged from caves, fired, and then disappeared underground. On February 23, 1945, Marines of Easy Company, 28th Regiment, finally reached the summit. They raised a small American flag, signaling the mountain's capture. As the flag went up, cheers erupted across the island and aboard the ships offshore. For a moment, amidst the carnage, there was hope. Later that day, a second, larger flag was raised to replace the first. The moment was captured by photographer Joe Rosenthal in what would become one of the most iconic images of the war. 6 Marines struggling together to lift the stars and stripes over Suribachi's peak. Into the meat grinder. After Suribachi fell, the Marines turned north, into the heart of the island. Here, the Japanese defenses were strongest. Kuribayashi's network of bunkers and tunnels allowed his troops to withstand artillery and airstrikes, then reappear in unexpected places. The Marines advanced yard by yard, often fighting the same ground multiple times as Japanese troops emerged from hidden tunnels behind them. The terrain itself was a nightmare. The island's volcanic ash made digging foxholes nearly impossible. The sun baked the open ground by day, while nights brought relentless Japanese counterattacks. The smell of sulfur and death hung in the air. Weapons of desperation became tools of survival. Flamethrowers cleared bunkers. Demolition charges collapsed tunnels. Tanks equipped with flamethrowers blasted fire into caves. The cost was staggering. Units that landed 1,000 strong were reduced to a handful of survivors within weeks. Medics worked frantically to save the wounded, often under fire themselves. Letters home, written in quiet moments, reflected exhaustion, fear, and determination. By early March, American forces had cut the island in two, but the Japanese refused to surrender. Every cave, every bunker, every tunnel was a fortress. A war of attrition. Unlike previous battles in the Pacific, the Japanese on Iwo Jima did not rely on mass suicide charges. General Kuribayashi forbade them, believing they wasted lives for little effect. Instead, his men fought from cover, forcing the Marines into costly assaults. This strategy turned the battle into one of attrition. For the Marines, there was no rest. Exhausted soldiers rotated forward, then back, only to be sent forward again. Food and water were scarce. For the Japanese, there was no hope of reinforcement or escape. They fought with fanatical resolve, knowing death was certain. By mid-March, American forces had captured most of the island's airfields and pushed the Japanese into the northern end of Iwo Jima. Kuribayashi, refusing to die in a wasteful charge, continued to command from underground until the very end. On March 25, 1945, after more than a month of combat, organized Japanese resistance finally collapsed. Kuribayashi himself likely died in battle, though his body was never conclusively identified. Of the 21,000 Japanese soldiers who defended Iwo Jima, only about 200 were captured alive. The rest fought to the death. The cost of victory. The American victory at Iwo Jima came at a price almost too high to imagine. Out of 70,000 Marines who fought on the island, nearly 7,000 were killed, and more than 19,000 wounded. It was the only major battle in the Pacific where U.S. casualties exceeded those of the Japanese. The capture of the island, however, had enormous strategic value. In the months that followed, more than 2,400 crippled B-29 bombers made emergency landings on Iwo Jima, each plane carrying 10 or 11 crewmen whose lives were saved because the island had been taken. The flag raising on Mount Suribachi became a rallying symbol back home. Iwo Jima became sacred ground, a place where courage and reached their peak. Legacy of Iwo. In the end, the battle for Iwo Jima was more than just a military victory. It was a symbol of what the war in the Pacific had become, a struggle of endurance, where neither side would yield. The ground was paid for in blood. For the United States, the battle showed how costly the final invasion of Japan would be. If a tiny island of 8 square miles could inflict nearly 30,000 American casualties, what would happen when the U.S. invaded the Japanese home islands? This question weighed heavily on American leaders in the months that followed, influencing the decision to use atomic bombs later that year. For Japan, Iwo Jima was both a tragedy and a testament. General Kuribayashi's defense inflicted enormous losses, but it could not change the outcome. The island was lost. For history, Iwo Jima remains one of the most brutal battles ever fought, not just in World War II, but in all of human conflict. Conclusion: 36 days, 70,000 Marines, 21,000 Japanese defenders, an island just 8 square miles in size. The numbers only tell part of the story. The true measure of Iwo Jima lies in the courage of those who fought, the lives that were lost, and the enduring image of a flag raised over volcanic ash. The Battle of Iwo Jima was not the end of the Pacific War, but it was a turning point, a glimpse of the terrible cost still to come, and a chapter that continues to echo through history.